November 17th, 2018. That was the day I was coming back home from a band competition in Bakersfield that had gotten canceled a little bit early because of the smoke fires that were going on in California at the time. So we came back that Saturday, and we stopped at some random Jack in the Box that was on the way. And I was sitting at a booth. My friends were standing in line ordering curly fries or whatever, and I was scrolling through my phone, and I got this notification on Facebook that it was my cousin Jonathan's birthday. I'd completely forgotten because I'm awful at birthdays, and so I just gave him a call, and I left a voicemail, and I told him that, happy birthday, and I'm sorry that I couldn't make it today, but I hope that we could celebrate next week. And then next week rolled around, and he still hadn't called me back, but, I get it. People are busy. I didn't really think about it until the night of November 24th. My parents sat me down that night, and they told me that Jonathan had taken his life on the 16th, which was the day before his birthday. It was the day before I had called him. That was one of the worst nights of my 17-year-old life. I have no words to describe how awful it was. I cried all night. But the next morning, I had to get up early. I had this marching band performance in the Festival of Lights that day. And the whole day, I couldn't even remember my music. I barely remembered how to walk. It was awful. All I kept thinking was, how could you have forgotten his birthday? Why didn't you call him earlier? Why didn't you do something? And by the time I was done, I never wanted to step foot in that band room ever again. But I had to, because the next day, I'd wind ensemble in the morning because of school. So I had to get up, go to school, and that day I woke up. I cried on my way to school. I fixed my makeup in the car before wind ensemble. I was late to wind ensemble. And then I went through the rest of my day. And I went home. I went to sleep. And I had to get up again the next day. And that was pretty much my life, just getting up, going to school, going home, doing my homework, going to sleep, and getting up again. It felt like life was happening, and I was kind of just passing through. My statistics class took a test while I was at his funeral, and the day I came back, I looked at my teacher and I said, yeah, I'll take the test, tomorrow after school. And he looked at me and he said, are you sure? And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I totally got this. But in my head, I thought, you don't got this. You are not going to do well on this test. You have not studied at all. You look like you just walked out of a garbage can. Why did you think you could do this? You're going to fail. The next day I took the test, and I was completely right. I did not do well on the test at all because, A, I didn't study. I'd been sleeping on the couch all day, and honestly, I barely even knew what the test was about. And all I could think was, why did I say yes? Why did I push myself to still try to be a student, to still try to be a functioning member of society, when the truth was, I barely even knew how to function anymore. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. Why did I say yes? Why didn't I say, no, can I please take that test later? Why didn't I say, no, can I please get an extension on that assignment? Why didn't I say, can I please go home? Because that's what I wanted to do. Why did I say yes? Why didn't I say no? It's a hard time. Why didn't I say no? Well, we all have different reactions in times of loss. Some of us cry a lot. Some of us don't cry at all. Some of us keep ourselves really busy. Some of us don't do anything at all. And kind of similarly, in different cultures, we have different social norms on how we should grieve. For example, there's this anthropologist. Her name is Nguyen, and she found that in Egypt, people are encouraged to express their grief, really give an outpouring of emotion. While in Bali, people are encouraged to kind of constrict their grief, to even be joyful or else make everyone else around them uncomfortable. Now let's think about it in the context of the United States. What do? Well, the first thing we do is we can make it a headline. We can say, this celebrity has died. Let's take pictures of his crying wife and put her funeral dress on who wore it better. We can blame others. We can say that Ariana Grande milked Mac Miller's death for attention, and she's the one that caused it. We can praise people for not showing any emotion. We can praise Jackie Kennedy for not shedding a tear at her husband's funeral. We do everything except acknowledge the profound pain that comes with grief. We forget Jackie Kennedy's screams when her husband's blood is on her pink suit, and we erase the relationship between Ariana Grande and the man she loved for years. We do everything to avoid confronting death and avoid addressing the emotional turmoil that comes for those left behind. And perhaps worst of all, we see death in the news every single day. And yet, what do most of us do? We look at our phones, get the notification, read a headline, maybe skim the article, and then we put it down. We go out to dinner. We're desensitized from it because, you know what, it kind of stays in the back of our mind, but not really. And once it's faded from the news headline, it's kind of faded from our lives. We don't really think about it. We forget that real tragedies happen, that real families lost somebody, that real families lost their mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, cousins, weird uncles, embarrassing grandmas. We forget that they lost somebody. And because of this, we don't really know how to deal with grief anymore. One of the questions that grief counselors have to answer the most is, how do I grieve? Let me tell you what I did. I tried to put it in this little box and kind of shove it away until it's ready to come out whole again. I spent half of my time crying and half of my time thinking about how to make everyone else around me comfortable, when the truth was, I was uncomfortable all the time. It was an incredibly isolating experience. But the most ironic part about it is that a lot of people feel this way. Even though more than half of Americans believe that we are more open to issues about death and dying than we were a decade ago, 63% still say that they've avoided talking to someone about a loss because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Over half of Americans say that they don't know where to turn in their community if they suffer a loss. And less than half of Americans, among those who have lost a parent growing up, less than half of them say that they knew where to find grief resources. But it wasn't always like this. Think about it. In a pre-industrial society, we had really small communities, we had short lifespans, and we had this greater emphasis on kinship and religion. And because we had these small communities, every single person played a really integral role. So when a death occurred, it was felt by the entire community, not just by their immediate family. Now we have these really large, heterogeneous societies, and although they're beautiful, they come with this decreased sense of kinship and religion, which often gave death a meaning and a purpose. We see the nuclearization of the family, which means that we see death less often with members of our extended family. And when we do suffer a very personal loss, we have less access to that communication with a constellation of support that we used to have within that extended family. We have RBG-style lifespans, thanks to medical advances, but that means we get to experience death less often as a natural part of life. When we do see the death and the dying, we segregate them away from everyone else. We have built a society that praises beauty based on youth and on health. So we don't really think about what it means to be aging and dying anymore. We also have these macro institutions that place constrictions on our public grieving behaviors, like your workplace that dictates your time period for mourning, or the medical care system that dictates the events leading up to and immediately following death. It used to be that people had to wear black, that they had to mourn publicly. But now when we do that, it's kind of like you're losing control or you're in bad taste. So now, what do? We constrict our grief into a little box rather than be vulnerable and honest about our emotions. But let's face it, we are a society that is surrounded by loss. It happens every single day, and although this audience is very young, and most of us have been lucky enough not to experience loss on a very personal level, it will happen because it happens to everybody. And in that time, we need to know how to deal with it and how to help others through it. And believe me, I know more than anyone else how awkward it can be to say, "I'm so sorry for your loss," or to pick up some random condolence card from Target and sign it and give it to someone, especially if you don't know them that well. But let me tell you something. When we lost Jonathan, it was one of the hardest times of our lives. And the people that I thought would say something said nothing. And it made me feel so alone. But what's weird is that the people that I didn't know really well, the people that I didn't think would say anything, they came out and they said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. What can I do to help?" They gave me that random condolence card from Target. And I realized that it doesn't really matter who you are, as long as you say something. As long as you say something, because it makes that other person feel less alone. Even my teachers said something. Some of them gave me a hug. I didn't know them that well, but it made me feel like they cared. It made me feel less alone. And I know it's an uncomfortable subject. Believe me, I still don't like talking about it. But I still miss Jonathan when I play the trombone, or when I use those white strips that he hated because they strip away your enamel, but I use them anyways because it makes your smile really good. And when I eat quinoa because he told me to, even though it has the most disgusting texture on the planet. Or when I go on a hike because he used to post Instagram posts with these annoyingly beautiful captions about his insane hiking adventures that I was always jealous of. When times of loss happen, we need to be there instead of be onlookers too afraid of saying the wrong thing. We need to be there instead of hide because we don't know what to say, because we don't know the person that well. We need to be there because even though it's uncomfortable, it's necessary. And we need to be there because they're not anymore, and that's the hardest thing to deal with. And once we start doing that, saying something, being there, we can begin to learn how to have a healthy response to and how to give more compassionate support when bad things happen. Thank you.